Hey, welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Human School, where we give you some background information about how we came to be, where we are now, and then some curiosities that we have for the week. So let's start with some background information. So when it comes to our human school work, what have we learned so far from this process, and what are we hoping to learn from our experience?
I think one of the things that we've learned is just what we're doing here, and that's the learning in public piece. And I think that this is really driven by one of Chad's original ideas, that what we see out in the public around our peers is a lot of polished products. And while we want our stuff to look professional, we also want to sort of draw back the curtain and see some of the messiness that happens behind the scenes. And you can see some of the messiness not only in our conversations, but I know that we've talked about how the project is iterating even after just a short period of time that's out there. I think one thing that I've personally learned is that it does take a lot of time. So prioritizing and finding that sort of 80-20 to be most productive with it has been a challenge for me. And what was the other question?
What are you hoping to learn about?
I really want to see where this thing goes in a year in terms of the idea itself and how it evolves. And I think that's really what we're committing to in this first period of time, which we're sort of randomly calculating as a year. But, you know, when it's 2023, how will the idea look different based on the conversations that we're having, not only with each other, but with some of the people that come on to discuss these ideas with us?
I think the things that I would add to that, to what Randy had shared, for me personally, I just wanted to spend a year learning and being open to whatever happened or whatever new insights or ideas, not really having kind of a pre-focus. I think that we have a clear focus on testing out the mind shifts within the compass points and the compass points themselves. And where that has kind of borne the most fruit is that every conversation, every book, every blog post, every article, every podcast that I listen to, I start to see the world through the lens of those compass points. So what's the story they're telling? How have they curated and, learned from what happened? How did they begin inventing and designing, and where did their objections start? And so that's the thing that it has allowed me to kind of create a new lens in front of my face as we do this work really intentionally. And as Randy shared, the learning in public and being messy, it's just a philosophy that, when that person shows up and they give you the, 1 hour, sharing, they're oftentimes not highlighting hopefully the hours and hours and hours of vetting those ideas. And what we're really trying to do, and maybe not the most exciting all the time, but what we are trying to do is show that learning learning is messy. It's slow. It's methodical. It's equally intentional and then completely random at the same time. We talk all the time about these two things in tension. So we're intentionally having these conversations, but we're really open to what's uncovered within them. And I think that's the difference. So we're trying to apply some research type principles, but then also just really, truly being open to what happens as a result of it.
I'm really enjoying all of the learning because the two of you have a wealth of more experience in these areas and have been doing a lot of this work a lot longer. So I'm like a sponge with all of it. But I also, as having been in the classroom just a few years ago and still being in classrooms with teachers, my wonder always is what it looks like, because I started in a place that really fits a lot of what we've talked about and then haven't seen that since. And so I love hearing from people who are doing this and then learning what things occurred that moved them in that position, so that I can bring that back to the people that I work with and talk about the places that they have space, that they may not realize, in order to make some decisions, and using our language and talking about the compass points and the mind shifts as ways to help them think through it, and make a plan for their own context. So that's sort of my learning and hope from the process. So moving from there, let's talk a little bit about what we are curious about this week and where we're seeing our compass points and our mind shifts.
So I started listening to the On Being podcast, and one of the episodes that I listened to was with somebody named Trabian Shorters. And what was really interesting about it was the idea that the way that we think, or our mind shifts, are oftentimes not even conscious, that our behaviors are so spontaneous and that they are driven by preconditioning, so to speak, and that we don't even normally put much thought into those actions because they just happen. And they have been created by the climate and the culture and the world in which we work. And what we have to do is slow down and be aware of those things. And what it helped me understand was, as we're trying to share new ideas with people, and we're talking about this idea of mindsets and mind shifts, that really we're trying to help people move from something that has become automatic, like I am compliant, and slow down and think like I can be something other than that. And the structures in which I function are actually causing me to behave that way. And do I really want to behave that way? And I think, so that's the idea in somebody's mind. But if we actually step outside of that person and look at it from our own perspective, looking at somebody who's thinking differently than us, we can then reframe that as not being judgmental for their choice, but saying their behavior is a byproduct of the system in which they live and inhabit. And how can we always say, create the conditions for them to carry out that mind shift as it's articulated by them or by us or by whomever. But I think it really helped me think about this idea of not being judgmental. And it really gave me an opening in which to sort of free myself from that angst of like, ugh, what do I do with these people who don't think the way that I think that they should think? So that was a really enlightening moment for me this week.
That's great. That reminds me of what I was going to talk about is sort of twofold. So we're reading The Human Element by Nurga Chantal, and one of the chapters that we read for this week was about inertia, and that one really sat with me because I feel like that's so much of what we watch, whether it's in professional settings, in personal lives, in day-to-day, that the familiar is so comfortable, and we would rather keep moving forward even when we're uncomfortable or unhappy, thinking about classroom teachers and feeling like they don't like the testing environment or the focus on testing. They don't like the focus on curriculum. They don't like feeling like they have to do X, Y, and Z. So when presented oftentimes with some alternatives, they're really scary. But what I appreciate is the conversations around what to do about that, as opposed to just identifying them as an issue. And so some of the work that I've been doing this year is around some pretty large systemic shifts in our district, if there is an eventual buy-in for it. But thinking about that and what it looks like to try to present those ideas for teachers and staff in a way that feels manageable as opposed to this huge, overwhelming shift in practice that disrupts their inertia and shuts down the conversation. How to present, for example, a couple of different options and then explaining why there is one preferred option, but still giving people some voice, or exposing them to it and creating familiarity with it over and over and over again, so it feels less scary. So I appreciated that, and that notion of inertia that you were kind of talking about, Randy, is the one that I'm thinking a lot about this week.
Mm-hmm. Good connections. Any thoughts, Chad?
No. I was waiting for Rachel to wrap up. No, I'm good.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us in this week's Inside the Human School, where we work to place humanity at the center of all design. If you'd like to learn more, visit thehuman.school and our Learning in Public hub for our additional resources, and join the conversation in our Facebook community or on our website, committed to placing humanity at the center of all design. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day, guys.
Bye-bye.